Hey everybody, today we're going to be looking at line traces, and so let's just go ahead and dive in and take a look at something here. Right now I've got this arrow sending out a line trace, and you'll notice it's going through this block and it's hitting fill 2 right here. The line trace is able to send us back some information. I'm going to show you how we do that here in just a little bit, but we also want to talk about why it's ignoring this block and it's hitting this block. Okay, now we're going to build these things ourselves, but we're also needing to understand how these line traces work. So this line trace right here, we're going to build that. You guys are going to build that along with me. And we also need to know what kind of things are going to get hit whenever we actually use a line trace. So right now, this particular block, if we go over to the collision settings, which is where we're going to find our trace settings, right here we have our trace response here on the right side, and right now this first block is set for overlap and this other block is set for block. So if we look at visibility and camera here, we can see that we're set for block on this one, and on the other one, which happens to be named fill as well, we have overlap. Now I can also set this first fill for ignore, and we're going to get the same kind of thing here with these different fill blocks, because with a line trace it uses ignore and overlap kind of like the same thing. Like a line trace is just one line, it just goes through till it hits something, it hits a block. Really, that's what it's looking for, something to actually block it. Later on we'll look at a multi-line trace, and that just keeps going, and we can specify a lot of things about it, like how far it will go. You'll notice if you look at this arrow that's sending out the trace, it's not going all the way to the end of the map, it's just going somewhere inside of this other block of fill right there. And in fact, if I move fill 1 a little bit closer and this one a little bit further back, you'll notice now we don't even get a hit. Probably, unless this, yep, we don't get a hit because this line trace only goes so far. We can specify how far we want our line trace to go, so we can use this as a sensing sort of tool. All right, so let's go ahead and build this, and we'll take a look at why visibility and camera are in here and why block and overlap and ignore work the way they do. Okay, so we're just going to build our own version of that arrow with a line trace in it. Let's go ahead and go back to our content folder. We're going to go into our actor blueprints because that's where we are doing a lot of our building right now. And let's make an actor. We're going to right click in here. We're going to go to blueprint class. We're going to make an actor. And let's call this line trace arrow. Okay. Now what we're going to do with this is use a little static mesh that we've seen in the Polygon prototype setup. And to get that, let's see, we want to go into our content. We're going to go into the Polygon prototype under meshes, and should be under our probably our icons, because the arrow is something that's used to kind of set up and leave messages for other people that are coming in to work on the same project. So there we go, the SM icon light. Let's see, I'm just going to drag that into here. Whoops, nope, not that one. There we go. This is the one we're working on right now. We'll actually get rid of that one, we don't need it. And you'll notice something, that this has got our arrow popping out, or it's pointing in the Y direction, and that's going to be important to know which way this is pointing a little bit later on. Let's go ahead and take a look. We're going to compile this. I'm going to go to the event graph, and let's start working on our line trace. So our line trace is something that we want to have working all the time. We're not really going to be manning it or anything at this point, so we're going to use the event tick to do that. That means that every frame this line trace is going to fire off, and we're going to get some information about it. So to do that, let's go ahead and have that line trace happen. Let's see, we're going to do line trace by channel. Well, I think we're going to find initially line trace by channel is the one we're going to be using quite often. We'll need to give it a start, so we need to get the default scene root. We want to get just where that starts, so we're going to need to get a reference for that, so we're going to drag it in. And then we're going to get our world location. We want to know where we're at in the world, so we're going to get world location. Okay, and then we also need to know which way we're facing. Now, if it's not a character, the forward vector, which is what we want to know, forward vector gives us which way we're facing. But on something that's not a character, the forward vector often points down or off in a different direction. So we're going to have to check on that in the game and see which way the trace is coming out, and we'll have to adjust our static mesh to kind of go along with that. But as far as our world location, that's where we're starting. So we can go ahead and tie that into our start right here. And then with this, what we want to do is we're going to kind of work backwards. So what we want to do is we want to get a certain amount far out away from where we're starting. So we're going to add two vectors together. We're going to add on the initial world location, and then we're going to add in another location that's a little bit further out. So to do that, we need to take this value right here. That's our initial value. And then from our forward vector, to get our length, what we're going to do is we're going to multiply our forward vector, okay, times a float. So we can control that float. We can decide how far out we want that to go. Nice thing is that this does a lot of the math for us. We'll go in and break this out a little bit later on. But right now, what you need to know is about 300 in here, or 400. I think I'm going to do 400. That in Unreal terms, in Unreal Engine terms, that's centimeters. So you can kind of get an idea of how far or how big these numbers are often going to have to be. All right, so as far as a line trace goes, this is probably the most important part right here. It's this thing saying, hey, this is how far out we want this line trace to go. Now what we want to do is we want to break this hit out. Now you can also use, whoop, let's go ahead and take that off. You can also use break hit, and you'll end up with the same information that we have here. I don't want to have another node in here to play with, because later on we're going to end up with quite a few nodes together. So let's just keep this one here. From here, what I want to do is I'm going to have it put out the name of the thing that we are actually looking at with the line trace. So we're going to use something I use quite often called print string. Print string will put that name out to the screen. It's not necessarily a UI or HUD kind of thing. It's just something you can use while you're in development, so you can get some information very quickly. And from here, we want to get, you can use either the hit actor or the component. It's good to go ahead and use the component most often, because sometimes actors are made out of multiple components. And you may say like, oh, well, I want to see if I'm touching the arm, the leg, a wheel on this car, that kind of thing. So that'll give us the information of what we're actually touching as opposed to the whole thing. In this case, all these primitives are going to be the component and the actor name. So we'll go ahead and compile that. And we're pretty much ready to go. This thing should be able to point at Phil as well and get all of the information that it needs. Let's go ahead and drag this one in. All right, so this was in our actor blueprints, and this is our line trace arrow here. Okay, so now we're going to find out which way the line is facing for this line trace. Okay, and currently I'm not seeing a line trace coming out of this one, so let's figure out why. Okay, access non-break hit result. Okay. Actually, that's with that error is with something else. It's not with this. It's with another piece we're working on. Let's go back in here and figure out what we might be missing. Our event tick is set. We have a line trace going out based on our default scene route. Let's see, we got our forward vector. Everything's actually looking pretty good here. Let's see. Yeah, I don't really see a problem. Structure. Yep, that looks fine. Let's see again. Let's see. Maybe we had an issue with this one when we brought it in. Oh, I know what I did. So one thing on these line traces here, let's talk about it, because that's the reason we're not seeing anything. Right now we're on the visibility channel. We also have the camera channel. These really could be called almost anything. They could be called channel 1, channel 2, but they call them visibility and camera. We can also make our own channels if we want to, and those can be used to provide more complexity later on. But the thing that I forgot is this draw debug type. We can't actually see our trace unless we say, hey, why don't you show it to us? So for one frame, that would go by very, very quickly. We wouldn't be able to see it very well. For the duration, that's while you're activating it. And then persistent just leaves it on the screen. I like persistent just because I want to be able to see it when it's happening. So there we go. Now I think we're going to see it. Let's go ahead down here. Yeah, it is poking out the left side, which if we were going to actually look at this on here, we would recognize right away that it's going out that X direction right there. And if we hover over get forward vector, it is going out in the X direction. So what I need to do is go in here and turn this so it's facing in the same direction as what is essentially the X direction for the scene root. Okay, so 90 degrees. That should do it for us. Let's check it. We compile. All right, let's try this one more time. Okay, let's see. Are we? Yep, we're going in the right direction. Okay, so we have our correct direction for our line trace. I'm going to go ahead and make this guy rotate so we're facing this fill setup right here. Okay, and that should be close enough, but I'm just going to put it right up on there just in case. And to make sure that this one is not reporting constantly, I'm going to go ahead and pull it back so it's not looking at anything. All right, so we can see that our line trace is getting a good hit. We're skimming right above the top here. And we can tell it's got a good hit because we get a little red cube where we have a good hit, and then we see a green line afterwards. Okay, so obviously fill 2 has a block set up right now. But you know what, I'd kind of like to see what all we can see here without having to really worry about moving this thing around in game. So what I want to do is I'm going to move all these together, and we're going to grab this one for our new arrow that we just set up. And I want this to look at all of these. And to do that, I'm going to use something that we haven't really touched yet. It's called a rotator. Okay, so or rotating movement in this case. But if you hear somebody say, like, we're going to add a rotator, that's what they're talking about. Okay, so rotating movement's really easy to work with. It usually starts rotating in the Z-axis. That's because that's like the pin that goes through the middle of everything. So it's going to rotate around that Z-axis. And now when we rotate, we're going to see something kind of pretty. Let's see. Aha! All right, and it's catch and fill and editor cube. It doesn't look like it's quite making it to the other one, so I just have to do a couple different things. I either could extend the range of the trace, or I could move the cubes in closer. But in this case, I think I want to extend the range of the trace. So to do that, remember I have to go back in here, and I'm going to change this value. I'm going to say 600. That should get us out a good bit further. Hit play. And let's see. Oh yeah, it's really going out a lot further. We're getting a lot more hits. So this is able to provide us with a lot more information about what's going on. And now that we kind of understand how a line trace works, let me show you where we're headed. Now that we have the line trace finding things, I can do things like this. I actually have this already built, and this is going to allow us to add a lot more fun into our puzzle game. And in fact, I can throw this thing if I want to. Let's see. Now it's spinning. Whee! Throw it away. All right. So you have some fun stuff to look forward to, but for right now, let's have you build our line trace arrow, add that rotating movement onto it, and check your assignment for the spacing and what kind of cubes and other objects we want that line trace to hit. And then I'll come over and check that over your shoulder. All right. We're going to have some more fun here. Let's see what you do. Get to it.